I thought this was going to be a beautiful, haunting fairy tale, but instead it was one of the most uncomfortable reads we've ever read. Welcome back to The Bookish Wolf. I'm Josh. This is probably one of those times where judging a book by its cover didn't come out great. We are going to be reviewing Honeysuckle by Bard Friedman Tell. We found Honeysuckle at Barnes & Noble's, and I'm not gonna lie, the cover is what got me. It just looked different. Then I flipped it over and read on the back, "Once upon a time on the edge between meadow and forest, there was a lonely child with only his older sister for company. In exchange for being left in peace, his sister made him a playmate, Day, a girl woven from flowers and words. And for the first time, this boy, Rory, had a friend." Also, it said, "A hauntingly lyrical fairy tale, like horror, lush world building, devastatingly beautiful prose, equal parts fairy tale and nightmare, beautiful and terrifying, innocent and disturbed, deeply impressive." So I thought, okay, this is going to be really good. But after finishing it, it's not much of a horror at all. If I had to compare it to anything we've read, it reminded me of Frankenstein, a story about creation, control. It just didn't have all the killing. So this is Bard Friedman's debut novel, and we have to keep that in mind when we're reading the story. The story starts off very strong. We follow Rory, who's about 8 years old, and his older sister, Winnie. Winnie's not really in the story much. He's at the beginning and at the end of the story, but it's mostly about Rory. And it's that familiar dynamic. He wants to play, he wants her attention, but she's growing up and she's starting to pull away. And there's a pretty big age gap between them. So there are some things in the story we just accept. We see that they live in this house with just a tutor and a housekeeper, no parents. We've come to find out that Winnie knows magic, and again, you just accept that there's magic in this world. So she makes Rory a deal. If he leaves her alone, she'll make him a playmate. So she creates something called a blodawed, a girl made of flowers. In Welsh mythology, it's literally a woman created from flowers. But in this story, there's a catch. She's temporary. She only lasts as long as the season her flowers bloom. And when that season ends, she starts to wither. So I'm with Rory here. He has trouble pronouncing blodawed, and he names her Day. And this is probably the best part of the book. This feels like a fairy tale. They explore the woods, they have sleepovers, they create their own communication because she doesn't have a voice. And it's just simple, very innocent. Kids are just being kids. And at this point, I'm thinking this is a pretty good story. It reminds me of The Secret Garden, just that magical place of exploring. And obviously she's a magical creature and you just are wrapped up in the magic of it all. But then the seasons start to change and we see that Day starts to fall apart. Rory is 8, he panics, he runs to Winnie, and she fixes her through a process they just call the transition from one season to the other. And it's a pattern that we see throughout the book. Every season, Day is kind of reset. She doesn't lose her memory or anything like that. She just gets new flowers. Her appearance changed according to what the flower she's made of. But we see that she is dependent on somebody else to keep existing. And that's going to be a theme throughout the whole book. As Rory gets older, the tone of the story starts to shift. What starts off as that innocent companionship slowly turns into something obsessive. He learns how to perform the transition himself. And at first it seems like growth, like he's taking responsibility, but as the reader, we start to realize it's not really about helping Day, it's about keeping her. This is where the book is clearly trying to explore the main themes of love, power, autonomy, and more importantly, consent. And to be fair, those ideas are here. Day can't really consent. Her entire existence depends on Rory now. So even when he asks her before making changes to her, it's not really a choice. And that's a really interesting concept here. But this is where the book starts to just lose me. Instead of letting the idea speak for itself, the story introduces more mature and explicit elements while the characters are still just teenagers. and it gets very graphic. As I was reading, it didn't really add to the message. It's just gross. I understand what the author is trying to do, but you're reading about teenagers, and it's just, I skipped over this part. Once these scenes came up, I just skimmed it to see where they ended, because honestly, I didn't need to read it. The story of control and dependency was just, it was already there. It was strong enough, and you didn't need to push it in that direction to make the point. And instead, it just made the book just feel uncomfortable in a way I don't think was intentional or meaningful. Structurally, also, the book was a bit messy. There was 80 chapters in this book. Each chapter was maybe 4 to 3 pages, and it switched between Rory's narrative and Day's narrative of the same kind of events, but it also jumped between first person and third person. It felt a little disorientating trying to like keep up with things. It's just hard enough for me to follow a story, and when it jumps timelines and stuff like that, I could typically stick with it, but with such fast cuts and reading the same event twice, I felt lost. And I also felt like some things just were repeated for, we already understood what was going on between the characters' head. We didn't have to have that first person narrative of it. So as the story goes on, Rory becomes more and more focused on extending the time between the transitions. He wanted to keep Day past the season she needed to be in. He also was trying to give her more abilities. He even tried to give her a voice at one point. But again, he keeps making these decisions for her, even when he promises not to. So there's a part in the story where you see the struggle that Day has with being dependent on Rory, but her longing to be independent. She falls in love with the land around her, with the birds around her. The birds become who she spends most of her time with when Rory is out trying to figure out ways to work this transition. And you kind of get that same feeling of Kaya from Where the Crawdads Sing, of how the nature is her solitude and the birds become who she is more related to. And so we just see the struggle of when Rory comes back, Day wants to just stay in the wilderness, but she knows with the Boulderweds, they are tied to their creator. So she knows even if she doesn't want to, there's just this yearning that she has to go back to Rory. And so it's just a struggle back and forth. You feel for Day in these moments. And that's where the theme of consent really comes through, not in what he says, but in the way he does things. By the end of the book, I appreciated Day's arc, her growth, her awareness of things, her push towards independence. That part I enjoyed. I'm glad I finished the book because of that. But as far as Rory as a character, I just never connected with him. Even when the story tries to make you feel more understanding about his situation, it wanted you to sympathize with him, I couldn't. I just saw how selfish he was. I didn't really care what happened to him at the end. You have a point of time where you see the urgency of something that needs to happen for him to be happy. I didn't care. Whatever happened to him, I could have skipped all those chapters and just read the Days chapters, and I would have been satisfied with the story. So I understand what Bar Friedman was trying to get across, and again, this is her debut novel. I know nothing about writing a book. I don't understand the challenges. I don't understand the struggle you put and the hours you put to make your book. So I always feel that when I start a story, I'm going to finish it to the end, because the author did spend a good portion of their life to create this story, and so finishing it gives them the respect that they deserve, no matter if you enjoy the story or not. Like I said, I came really close to not finishing this book, but in the end I'm glad I did because of Day's arc. Bar Friedman does have strong ideas here, but for me it just wasn't executed in a way I enjoyed, and that could just be on me. So in the end, I did give it a 4 out of 10, and I'm glad I finished it, but it's just something I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend. It's a new release. I was convinced I was going to enjoy it because of the cover. Will I change my ways of thinking of judging books by the cover? Probably not. I'm still going to see an interesting cover, read the back, and if it interests me in that moment, I'm adding it to my Libby library, and when it gets to me, I'm going to forget all about what the story is about and just start reading it. Most of the time I enjoy the books. Sometimes it's a book that I struggle with. Thanks for watching. If you liked us, please like and subscribe to this video, and until next time, we'll see you then.